Okay.
Okay, so now folds to us on the button. We've got king 10. I'm going to go ahead and min raise to keep the ranges wider. He checks to us. What are you thinking here?
But what did you do on that? You bet? I missed that.
No. So we min raised,
right?
We min raised the button. Small blind folded, big blind called, and now he checked to us on the flop as ace 4-4.
So he's defending fairly wide.
Right.
Right. And I'm going to see. I would be. I don't know. I'd be c-betting with this ace showing. With a single Broadway card, I'd be c-betting.
Right, and I would recommend that you c-bet against your live opponents. Go ahead and bet half the pot, or you could even bet less than half the pot. You could bet like $8 here, or whatever, $10, and that would be like extremely profitable against like just a huge percentage of opponents that you're playing against. Because in order for them to meet minimum defense frequency on this board, or in order for them to prevent you from bluffing with any two cards on this flop, they would not only have to be calling with every pair, they would also have to be calling with every king high and every hand that has a backdoor straight flush draw. So like 6-5 of hearts, 6-5 of clubs, 5-3 of hearts. You know, like hands that you would never check call with here, they have to be check calling with 100% of the time to prevent you from bluffing with any two cards. And all the guys that you're playing against in a live game are just check folding way too often on this board, so you can c-bet too often and you'd be fine. Okay? But if you were playing against me, and you decided to start c-betting too much here, you would really hurt yourself, because I'm not folding enough of the time for you to c-bet with any two cards here. I'm check calling a ton with all of those hands, and if you check the turn, I know you never have an ace, and I'm planning on overbetting the river, and I'm going to punish you. Okay? So what I'm saying is, like, if you start c-betting too much on this flop, it's going to be really hard to compensate, because you won't be able to bet turns enough. There are just so many blank turn cards, you won't be able to bet enough. And what's the problem with king 10? Well, king 10 doesn't really have any back doors, with the exception of like the very rare queen jack. Right. You know? It doesn't have any backdoor draws. I would greatly prefer, like, if you're going to use a balanced c-betting strategy on this flop, c-bet with all of the backdoor flush draws, all the hands that have backdoor straight draws. Right. I would focus on those hands. And here, against a range this wide, when Snowie's defending with, over half of his hands when you're min raising, king high actually has a ton of showdown value in this spot. King high on an ace 4-4 board is going to win at showdown overwhelming majority of the time. Right. So do you have any questions as far as that goes? Is that an accurate yeah. I mean, so what I'm saying is, in practice, you should just be c-betting this board against everybody. But if you're playing against like some kind of
PokerSnowie is that it's too good.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't simulate bad players.
Right. So I have to tell you the difference. I want you to know what Snowie's doing, because now you know what a perfect opponent would do. You know, like, how sticky it would get. But in practice, once you understand the difference between what Snowie's doing and what your opponents are doing, you automatically know that you should just be c-betting this board. Okay, that's what I want. I want to get you to that point. So let's go ahead and just let's practice like we play. Let's go ahead and just c-bet like $8 here.
Okay.
Come on, what's going on here? I don't know why it's fighting back with me. All right, 1177 is fine.
That's fine.
Let's do that. There we go. He folds, and I was just rambling on again. Right. But now Queen 8 offsuit. Again, pay attention to the expected value here. So a raise here would be 0.07 big blinds negative EV, meaning that you would lose 35 cents on average if all four of your opponents were perfect players. Right. Okay? None of your opponents are playing perfectly, therefore I would recommend that you just go ahead and open Queen 8 offsuit, because I think your skill edge is going to overcome 7/100ths of a big blind deficit. Do you know what I'm saying? Right. So let's go ahead and min raise here. And again, this is why you have to play tighter against a good opponent, because he's just going to 3-bet you a ton from the button, and you're out of position. It's going to be tough.
Right, now you're folding.
Yeah, but against your, if your opponent is playing two face up on the button, he's not preventing you from opening wider. Then by all means, go ahead and open queen eight. Queen deuce, I would just go ahead and fold.
Yeah.
Snowy's using a mixed strategy. I would just fold. Now you should be raising every suited king on the button. Just there's no excuse for that. And now here on this board, why is king three such an awesome hand?
Well, you have backdoor. You have a backdoor spades. I mean, backdoor diamonds. You have backdoor a backdoor straight, and you can represent an ace.
Yeah. So you have a huge range advantage on this board because Snowy doesn't have aces or queens or ace king or ace queen here. He should have been three betting with those pre-flop. Okay.
Right. You have this blocker here.
So you have a huge range advantage here. On top of that, you have backdoor diamonds, so you know that there are 10 diamonds that could come off on the turn. So 10 of the 47 unseen turn cards are diamonds. You can keep firing with those. Okay. You know that 6 more of those cards will either be a jack or a 10 that give you a backdoor straight draw to Broadway. You can keep firing on those. You know that having a king in your hand makes it way less likely that your opponent has a hand like ace king or king queen or one of the gut shots like king jack or king 10 that he could potentially check call with.
Right.
You also know that if you c-bet and you hit a king on the turn, you can check it back, and a lot of times it'll be good at showdown because your opponent should be defending with every queen and every 8 in a heads-up pot. Okay, right. So king 3 is just an awesome hand, and you see that right away with the EV here. By c-betting,
right,
you're actually generating a 1.79 big blinds profit. Okay, now Snowy's saying to do something crazy. It's saying to 2x the pot. I wouldn't do that. What I would actually recommend doing on these boards is betting the pot. Why is betting the pot so powerful in this spot on this board?
Well, it's going to give them 2-1 to call you.
Right. So, and what happens when they're trying to check call with those gut shots? What happens when they're getting 2-1?
Well, if they have, let's say they have jack, jack 10 would be a double gut shot. Let's say they had
king jack or king 10 or jack 9. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say they have jack 9. They have 4 outs, so they're going to have about a 17% equity. Right, so then,
but that's assuming that they get to see the turn and the river, right? But we know different. We know that they're going to have to call another bet on the turn if they want to get to the river, right? So what you're doing by betting the pot here is you're denying direct equity to all of those gut shots: king jack, king 10, jack 9, jack 10, 10 9, and there's another one in there, right? There's not. And all the backdoor straight flush draws, right? So even a hand like
7-6 of diamonds or something.
Yeah, or even a hand like king 9 of hearts, or just all those different hands. By betting the pot, you're just denying them so much equity, and you're polarizing your range. So you're basically saying, like, I either have 2 pair or a set, or I'm barreling off with a hand like king 3 of diamonds, right? And it just makes the life of your opponent so difficult if you bet bigger on this flop and plan on firing the turn. And a lot of times they're just forced to check fold like that, but you have a plan for turns and rivers. You're not taking a bunch of time to think about what you want to do on this turn. You already know what you're doing.
So here I'm raising.
Always. There's absolutely no reason for you to be flatting with kings here. And you'll notice that by implementing the strategy that I've been sharing with you, like, you'll be 3-betting so much more often than people are used to, that a lot of times they'll be forced to widen their defense ranges, which is exactly what you want, right? You want to give them enough incentive that they can continue against your 3-bets, right? And what does that do? It adds value to the aces, kings, queens, ace, king region of your range. All of those hands are gaining equity immediately when people start defending too wide, right? The other thing is, by having the initiative with those, let's say you decide to 3-bet with ace-5 suited here, or 5-4 suited, something like that, or even king-jack suited, you're 3-betting with those hands. What you're doing is you're taking the initiative, and you're inflating the size of the pot and making people uncomfortable, and then you're following it up with aggression, and a lot of times they just crumble on turns and rivers. They just cannot hang on long enough.
Right.
because their range is inherently too weak. They're opening too wide. A lot of times they're defending too wide, and then you're just punishing them on later streets for big bet amounts. So here I would recommend potting it, or sometimes going just a
Right.
little bit less than that. So like about 35-50 would be perfect in my opinion. So he calls. What do you think on this flop?
I think it's an ideal flop, right? But you have to bet here, right? So it's an ideal flop, but
why do you have to bet here? Tell me why.
Because anybody with an ace is going to call.
Right. What's another reason?
That there's a straight and a flush out there, so you don't want to give them the odds to. They can't get a free card here because it's too
right.
much.
So you're not necessarily trying to deny them the odds to continue, but you're trying to at least charge them to continue. You have to charge them a premium if they want to continue with a hand like Queen Jack suited, or a hand like Jack 10 of spades, or even a hand like Queen 10 of clubs. You have to charge them something to continue against you, right? And the other thing is, how awkward would it be if you 3-bet out of the big blind here and then checked this flop? Like, most opponents are going to assume that you're pretty strong when you do that, and they get really tentative. They don't want to stab when that happens. Okay, so
I've been taking the initiative. All previously would be like out of character to check it here.
Exactly, right. You want to continue to tell the same story. You're taking the initiative with all of the made hands like this, and all of the hands that you 3-bet with as a bluff. So like, you're going to have a ton of Queen Jack of spades hands, Queen 10 of spades, 5-4 suited, all those hands. You want to follow through with those. And I think a half pot bet is a good size on this board. So that's about right. That you're because if you think about like what would happen if I bet the pot, well, now you might either fold out some of the bad aces your opponent is defending with preflop, or you're just going to make it so that your bet on the turn is so big that he doesn't really have a ton of incentive to continue against your tight range, right? And if you bet a quarter of the pot, what happens? Well, now you're giving direct odds. You're giving 5-1 to every gut shot that your opponent has in his range, right? So that both of those are not good options. So the best option is somewhere in the middle. It's about half the pot. Okay, so there's no hard and fast rule for choosing your bet size. It took me a really long time to learn that. You kind of just have to think about the different scale of bet sizes. Like, what would happen if I bet a quarter pot? Well, I'm just giving my opponent direct odds, and that's not what I want. What happens if I bet the pot? Now I'm starting to fold out hands like King X that I want my opponent to defend with. So you pick a happy medium. Half pot is about the right size here. So he calls. Now the turn is the 10 of spades. What are you thinking here?
I think it's a very bad card, right, for me. Because Queen Jack got there, and spades got there. I still can get a full house, but I don't like what, I'm not happy about this.
It's not the best card for your range by any means. Okay. And one of the things I want to look at here is so Snowy is saying to bet a quarter of the pot. I'm not 100% sure why that is. And it's saying that the EV of checking and betting is exactly the same if you bet a quarter pot. Now let's go up to half pot here. If you were betting half the pot, it would say just go ahead and bet 100% of the time. And if you bet the pot, it would also say go ahead and bet 80%. But
there's very little difference in EV between any of those, right?
No, so the bet sizes the EV is almost the same across all those bet sizes. So we have to think about what accomplishes the most against Snowy, what accomplishes the most against our human opponents. Well, Snowy is saying that its default would be to bet a quarter of the pot, and I think I know why that is. I think it would bet a quarter of the pot because it wants, the cutoff here to continue with every hand that has now picked up a gut shot, right? So any hand that has a queen or a jack or a 9 in it, or not a 9, a queen or a jack or a spade in it, it wants to continue, right? Whether it's ace queen or king jack or jack 8 suited or whatever it is, it wants all of those hands to continue.
Right.
For a quarter pot, right? I think that your human opponents will continue for more than that with a lot worse. I think they're going to be continuing with, a hand like king queen with the queen of spades, or king jack with the jack of spades. or any ace X with the ace of spades in it, and all the two pair. They'll also continue with king 10 or king 8 suited or 10 8 suited. I think they're continuing really wide, and I'd like to go ahead and value bet. And then the other thing that we accomplish is like by betting this turn, if we get raised, we know that our opponent is never ever raising us as a bluff here in a live game, right?
Right.
He would never ever do that. So we know that if we do get raised in this spot, we can very comfortably fold our hand, and we're not missing out on much equity. We would only be missing out on 20% equity, right? 10 board pair outs. So by betting and then folding to a raise, we're not sacrificing a ton of equity, and we're gaining a ton from all the two pair hands and all the draws that still need to continue. Okay, so although it looks like a bad card, it's not the best card for our range. There's still a lot of value that we can generate by betting half the pot here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Hang on just 1 second. Hold on just 1 second. All right.
You talking to me?
Yeah. Hang on. Just give me 1 minute.
Okay.
No problem. Okay, I'm back.
All right, cool. So, like I said, this isn't the best card in the world for us, but I would recommend betting and going ahead and generating value. And if you get raised, you know that your opponent is just never semi-bluffing against you here.
Right. Okay.
So Snowy calls.
All right. Perfect river. Best river ever.
Best possible river. So now tell me.
Well, the only thing that beats me are aces and eights, right? Which he doesn't. He certainly doesn't have aces because he would have raised pre-flop.
Right.
And eights is, if he has eights, good for him. So.
Right. I mean, if he has eights, you just let him have it. Yeah. So you basically have the absolute nuts on this board, or you should treat it as such. Right. Now, so question number one: how do we make the most money? So is betting better than checking on average here, and if so, why? You tell me.
Well, betting is better. If he had a missed draw, like let's say he had a queen of spades, and he had queen 8 with a queen of spades, or ace 8 with ace of spades, then that would be great. But he missed his flush, right? So someone drawing for a flush missed, and it's going to fold anyway to any bet. So there's no problem betting against them because they're going to fold no matter what, or they're going to check back and lose. So.
Well, so let me kind of give you a transcript of what my thoughts would sound like here. So This is my internal dialogue. Okay, I would go. Is betting better than checking on this river? If so, why? Okay, and then I would start thinking about my opponent's range. Okay, so what is he continuing with on the turn? Well, I know he's continuing with every ace X that has a spade in it. I know he's continuing with every king X that has a spade in it. A lot of times he would elect to slow play on the turn if he had a flush, and he would just continue with a hand like ace queen of spades and let me bet the river and then raise. Okay. I also know that he has a lot of two pair hands. Some of them just got counterfeited here. I know that he also has some draws like let's say queen 9 with the queen of spades that just bricked out. And I'm asking myself, if I check here, would he decide to turn those hands into a bluff, or would he value bet with less than kings full, right? For the most part, I don't think so. I don't think any logical player would have a lot of reason to start stabbing and trying to put me under a ton of pressure in this exact spot. I don't think he would do that. Okay, so right away I'm leaning toward betting. Then the next question I ask myself is which size will generate the most EV for me, right? Is it a quarter pot, half pot, pot, or all in, right? Which size is going to generate the most EV for me? And again, I have to start thinking about my opponent's range, okay? We know he doesn't have aces full, okay? We know he doesn't have quad eights. We know he can't have kings full because we have two kings in our hand. And we also know that it's very difficult for him to have a hand like ace-8 or king-8 because we're actually blocking out king-8 combos. Okay.
Right.
So what's the one of the strongest hands that we could expect our opponent to have here regularly? Okay. Well, if he slow played a flush, he could have a flush. Okay, but he has to be worried about aces full and kings full. If he has queen jack, he not only does he have to be afraid of a hand like ace queen of spades or ace jack of spades, he also has to be afraid of aces full and kings full. So our opponent is pretty weak here. He's pretty capped. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, if we were bluffing in this spot, we would for sure want to go with the overbet right here. We would absolutely want to go with the overbet because we know how capped and weak our opponent's range is. Okay,
right.
But when we actually have kings full here against a weak range, betting smaller is a lot more beneficial to us. So you see that Snowy was thinking along the lines of betting 25% of the pot. That's how weak our opponent is here. Betting 25% of the pot is going to generate 68 big blinds for us, right? Betting half the pot generates a little bit more money for us, and overbetting the pot would also generate a little bit more. So for me, against a live opponent, knowing that live opponents don't like to get stuck a lot of money, especially early in the session, I think I would lean toward betting like a third of the pot here.
But let me ask you a question: why, if a half a pot or one or 2x is giving a higher EV, why isn't Snowy suggesting that? Why is it suggesting
Snowy is suggesting the quarter pot bet for balance. So it's basically what it's saying is if we bet half the pot here for 77 big blinds, our range when we bet half the pot would be off balance in some way on this board, and that would result in the other opponent being able to exploit us. Okay, that's basically what it's saying. So for balance purposes, like putting together the perfect unexploitable strategy, it would bet a quarter of the pot here. We don't have to subscribe to those rules. We just need to do what makes the most money for us, right?
Right.
So as a default against a human, I would either be betting half the pot or a little bit less because humans are more risk averse than PokerSnowie is.
Right.
And I want to make sure that we can get called by a hand like ace queen or a hand like queen or a hand like ace 10 that just got counterfeit, or a hand like queen jack or spades that like the nut flush that's slow played, or a hand like 8-7 suited, like 8-7 of clubs. I want to get called by all of those hands.
Right.
And in order to do that, I think betting like a third of the pot would be best. So I would lean toward betting like 100 or 105 here.
Right.
And do you see how logical that is, right? It would, at this point, it would be pretty hard for you to argue with me and say that that is not a logical thought process, right?
No, I hear you.
Because I started by 1, I'm evaluating my range. 2, I'm evaluating my opponent's range. 3, I'm asking myself if betting is better than checking. We've determined that betting is better. And then, 4, I'm asking myself which size is most beneficial given the way our ranges match up. And 5, I'm actually going to execute,
Yeah.
So, and we get called, and that's exactly what I just said right here. You see that? I said I want to make sure we get called by ace queen. Ace queen is the weakest hand that we could expect our opponent to call with there regularly. Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm so glad that it was actually ace queen there. It makes me look like a genius. I'm not always a genius in real life. But if you bet half the pot or the pot there's no way you're ever getting called by ace queen. Okay.
Right.
So that's just what I wanted to point out.